Hello and welcome to today's Trend Talk session, Beyond SDN to an App-Centric World. I'm delighted you've been able to join us for today's session, and equally we will have questions at the end, so please do input those questions via Twitter using the handle @CiscoEMEA, and please mark it using #TrendTalk. We'll have, as I say, around 10 minutes at the end for those questions which we'll take live from you, and we'll be able to engage with our panel of guests that I'll be delighted to talk to over the next hour or so. Now, if we take a look at this concept of beyond SDN to an application-centric world, this is extremely important for us all within the Europe, Middle East and Africa region that we operate within today. Now, I'd say that's for a number of reasons. We have some regional market challenges where innovation, productivity and transformation within the region is hugely important for us. And it's hugely important for us in order to ensure that we're able to continue to deliver and to compete in this increasingly challenging and adaptive market. Applications have become the center for delivery of transformation and innovation within organizations today. Massively critical for us, not only to be able to ensure that companies can be agile, can be efficient, but also how do we ensure that we can capture some of the sheer volumes of information and of data that we all experience within the industry. Those volumes of information coming through multiple different routes, the increasing change and transition of organizations as data and processes become much more digitized. So how do we cope and how do we maximize the value and the benefit? Now today I'm delighted to be joined by a couple of esteemed guests with me in this studio. I have Puni Raja, who is a Chief Analyst from Canalys. Welcome, Puni.
Thank you.
And also Rene Reber, who's a Distinguished Engineer from Cisco. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a series of questions with the panel, not only with Puni and Rene, but also with some guests who will be joining us throughout today's session via telepresence. So Puni, I'd like to come to you first, if I may. So I have a number of questions for you. We're delighted to get your commentary. So firstly, we hear a lot about applications now and that they've become the focal point for organizations. What are some of the key challenges that our organizations are facing, and in particular, their IT delivery teams?
I think it's going to be useful to think about why applications have become so prominent. And when we look at what's driving applications, there are four pillars: the whole socialization, the mobility, analytics, and the fact that they can be consumed through cloud infrastructures. So this SMAC stack is driving ease, convenience, and making more enterprise employees hungry for smaller applications, but many more of them. What this means is that the time from conception to delivery and consumption is getting shorter. And so this in turn is putting a lot of pressure on the infrastructure to gear up to deal with a proliferation of many applications very fast to many more users, really.
Now, you used a term there, Puni, of SMAC stack. Can you just explain that a little bit more?
It's social, so we want to share with our customers, our partners, our colleagues, and there are ways of doing that much more easily. This event is on a social platform. Mobility. We're all accustomed to doing more, not just collaboration, but checking on status. Analytics, I think there's a lot to be said about what's changing with the availability of data and analytics. And the fact that the infrastructure now can scale up, be a resource anywhere, and still serve the consumer, the person who's using the application, is important.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Now, applications have always been important, as we know, but why are they under so much scrutiny today? What's changed?
Yeah, so it's visibility. I think, 10 years ago, we went into the workplace and used enterprise applications as part of a process. There was a lot more that was fixed around it. Today, because we're accustomed to, in our personal lives, being able to bend the technology to the way we want to work, we take that expectation into the workplace. And so we are forcing applications to be more visible. And once they're more visible, they become more accountable. The people providing them, supporting them, automatically become more accountable. So visibility is the reason why we're all feeling the pressure, as it were.
Okay. And does that mean that the way in which applications will be managed within these organizations and in the future, will that change, do you think, with these a modification of perception and need from all of us as individuals?
Absolutely. In fact, it already has. I think one of the biggest changes is, where it used to take us months or years to agree on new features and roll them out, today we're not only shortening it, but you and I no longer respond to green screens. We want the app to speak to us in a way that makes sense for us, to look good, to be easy, to be enticing. So when you break the application development and delivery process, you find that not only do we have developers and managers, but we also have user experience designers. We have people analysts who understand workflows and how a workflow could be changed and optimized as a result of better applications. So yes, the change has happened. It's going to accelerate. And
in those changes that you just mentioned there, of those different functional disciplines, I guess, that organizations are introducing, do you see that in particular types of organizations, or is that just something more broadly that you're seeing as a trend? So there are certain types of companies that are adopting those changes?
I think this is where segmenting customers in their way they use and the maturity is more important than their vertical segment, for example. Yeah. So where we see customers who understand that using the SMAC stack as part of their business process, then what they have done is they have put more application management responsibility to the infrastructure and created pressure there and changed or reprofiled the people who are closest to the business, who can anticipate and design tool sets in the shape of apps much faster. We see this across all verticals, but the trick is to find those customers who have embraced the SMAC stack as part of their go-to-market.
Great. Well, thank you, Puni, for that. And that gives me an interesting lead-in. Just starting to think of just the comment that you mentioned there of more application responsibility to the infrastructure, where I'd like to transition to Renee, to you, where we announced a couple of weeks ago within Cisco this concept of the application-centric infrastructure, linking to some of Puni's comments there. So why don't you briefly outline what that is?
Right. So application-centric infrastructure is basically a holistic, programmable, let me say, data center IT infrastructure approach. It brings data, application, storage, and security together under one common platform, be able to be controlled and steered from a controller central point of view, and all these technology agnostic. So it's about the two most important elements in a data center, which is application and data.
And why do we need this? Why does it help?
So the most or the biggest goal which is getting achieved with that is simplification. It's all about reducing complexity. We just hear that from Puni. It's about changes. It's about rapid adoption, time to market. It's about compliance, security. And with this infrastructure and this holistic approach, we can reduce massively complexity, which of course also helps to optimize OpEx and CapEx on the customer side.
Okay. Now, with any transition and change, always organizations will ask, well, that sounds great, but how do I adopt that within my environment? What guidance would you give there?
Of course. So firstly, you can transition to this new model without changing anything. That's an important factor. So you can smoothly take this transition. But of course, if you want to take out of that maximum benefits or maximum efficiency, it helps a lot to understand how your applications behave, what are the treatments they need, where are they, which one do you have. And also from an organizational perspective, over time, it certainly will help that teams are collaborating more each with the other and also with the respective business units. Because in this scenario, it's not anymore about technologies, but it's about service level agreements. So finally, service level agreement will dictate the IT infrastructure.
Okay, interesting. Thank you, Renee. So Puni, let me come back to you now. So I'd like to ask you a little bit about the service provider landscape and how is this change and transition in the industry affecting them?
Yeah, so service providers are an interesting group of companies. We're accustomed to them using infrastructure to deliver services, voice, data, managed services. There are two big ways in which this app centricity is driving them. For those who are still focused on providing infrastructure, their customers are asking for service level agreements that include application accountability. And so it means if you're a service provider with a healthy install base, you still have to look at how to embrace new capabilities that can allow you to stretch to the SLAs that your customers are wanting. Some service providers are being more adventurous, of course. As customers are looking towards the very many new apps that they need, there are some more stable apps that still need to continue, but can probably be delegated to a trusted third party. And so in those cases, service providers are upgrading their infrastructure so that they are themselves able to handle applications. So I'll give you a couple of very public examples. Orange, for example, has a broadening suite of applications that it will take care of for its customers and go towards the consumption end at customers. I think more recently, Swisscom, a couple of weeks ago, announced the Swiss Cloud, which is all about hardening privacy and being able to flex compliance requirements to meet customer-specific requirements. So these are ways in which service providers are embracing.
Okay, great. And also some shifts, it sounds like, within their own model.
Yes.
And that they're looking to transition some of the older environments to third parties, which is interesting as well.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Puni. So now we're going to be joined by Paolo Campoli via video. Hello, Paolo. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So, Paolo, you've heard the comments so far from Puni and also from Rene as we've talked about this transition and this change from evolving, towards an application-centric infrastructure. So you work heavily within Cisco's service provider business. You engage on a daily basis with our service providers. What, in your view, are the benefits for the service providers in moving towards this application-centric infrastructure?
Sure. Well, first of all, we need to consider what is driving them. They want to become a lean production factory for services to businesses and consumers. And they want to achieve a competitive cost base, especially under pressure on the revenue line, and they want to become much faster to the market. So when we consider application-centric infrastructure with them, we need to look at the drivers. On one side, in terms of velocity, they are cloudifying their network, right? They're taking intelligence in the network, they're running that intelligence from a virtualized automated data center, and they want to have an end-to-end perspective. Take service providers like Deutsche Telekom as an example with their TerraStream project. That's a perfect example of an IP-friendly or packet-friendly cloud-based a network platform where they drive intelligence from the data center. The other driver for them to consider and apply application-centric infrastructure, well, service providers at the end are large enterprises, so they have to become themselves more agile, more efficient, and ACI allows to get their IT assets simplified and come much closer to the applications they run internally. And the third driver, and I think that's very important as well, is in the game to be a winner in the cloud business, they have to compete on two aspects. One is economy of scale. And when you consider players like Amazon and Google, of course, economy of scale is something that is very, very difficult to parallel. So for them, ACI is a way to look at an incredible scale at very competitive incremental cost. And the other driver is to integrate in the cloud differentiation, data center and wide area network. So if they can take advantage of their physical assets on the wide area network, combined with data center and have end-to-end orchestration and performance consistency, that's a key differentiation. Take Telecom Italia as an example with their cloud offer, Nuvola Italiana as they call it. The key element of differentiation in their footprint is end-to-end SLA. So that's a great fit.
Okay, and Paolo, with some of those pieces that you see from a benefit perspective, so thank you for outlining that. How do you see service providers adopting an application-centric infrastructure? So how do you see the transition to the reality of this new world becoming implemented?
Sure. Well, we need to look at the inflection points. So today, probably the major inflection point from a business model and technology perspective for service providers is virtualization and SDN. So they all want to virtualize the infrastructure mainly for three reasons: to have integrated control of data center and network assets, to expose northbound APIs, and to basically have consistency of performances and simplify network provisioning. So when you consider, as an example, what British Telecom at the recent SDN World Congress described in their presentation, they say, whatever we do on virtualization and SDN, we want to have tight control of both the overlay and the underlay. We want to value our network assets, and we want to simplify managed services to enterprises. So you take ACI, and what ACI does in terms of virtualization, it plugs directly into those three principles, right? Integrated control of network and data center, northbound APIs to application developers, and of course simplification of the end-to-end model. But with one element taking that beyond SDN, which is application awareness and application proximity. So it dictates the way data center and network performs based on application requirements. To me, it fits very, very well into those major transitions of service providers.
And Paolo, if we look at the types of applications within the service provider where this transition would fit, I think it would be great for people to hear some examples of those that you feel would be most relevant. What are your thoughts there?
I believe a number of what we call layer 4 to layer 7 applications. So services, network services like security, firewalling, traffic management, basic network services, they will take a lot of advantage from application-centric infrastructure, because you take those control points, as I love to call them, they are just other applications that benefit from ACI in terms of agility and having an infrastructure, this data center and network infrastructure, which is policy-driven. Then you take higher-level applications, the ones that are visible to consumers, to end users, like mobility applications, monetization around mobile data, digital entertainment, and all of them will dramatically benefit of a simplified network design, fully integrated with network virtualization and data center. And ACI, it's all about that. So I think there will be a benefit both on the underlay layer and the visible layer to the end users.
That's great. Thank you, Paolo, for that. And I think just to hear some of those different transitions within the service provider and some of that dynamic is great. So I appreciate it. And you'll be with us for the Q&A as well.
Sure.
So what I'd like to do now is now we're going to go over to Camille and also to the team to talk a little bit about a case study and an example to bring this to life for everyone. So we're joined in the studio here, via telepresence, by a couple of folks where we're going to talk about Pramacom and also about the Czech police. And a little bit of background for you on this situation. So the radio communications provider, Pramacom, has developed some unique applications to help the Czech police to prioritize radio traffic in emergency situations. So this is a great example for us where we can talk about a specific use case, and it's about this particular tie to the applications, which of course we've been emphasizing the importance today around this topic. So Camille, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting us.
So Camille, I've got a couple of questions for you that would be great if you can help us to understand some of the different dynamics for Pramacom and also for the Czech police. So the first question is, what were the challenges faced by the Czech police?
So the Czech police, as well as other parts of emergency and rescue system in Czech Republic, is using the same professional radio network called Pegas. This network is owned by the state and is fully digital and secure, and those professional services rely on their network. However, this network is mainly focused on critical voice communications But the troops in field are demanding nowadays more and more high volume data. And those data should be transferred in a very secure and reliable way. It means if the police or fire brigades are facing any events and or accidents in field, they simply cannot fiddle with wires and switches and different settings and so on. So it just must work at the same moment. And it must provide the security level as they know from their professional mobile radios. And European Commission is now standardizing the LTE, the professional LTE, which is going to be used in this field. However, it's not yet available, and there are some estimations where it will be, but it's not now. So we've been facing two different problems. First, how to provide high bandwidth data with the same level of security the professional troops have from their professional mobile radios. And a second, how to simplify the setup process in field.
So thank you, Camille, for that. So a challenging environment, which is complex, and some specific requirements that you have for the Czech police. So what was the solution that you proposed in order to address that challenge?
So fortunately, we've been selected as one of the companies who can evaluate the programmability of Cisco routers. And this was our first idea that we will implement the stack to the Cisco router, which handles and can communicate via PMR, the professional mobile radio. And one of the first things we communicated this way was the key management. It means that we have an application which handles all key management through PMR radio, which is fine because there is a bandwidth available for this type of communication. And the rest of the communication can be handled via virtually any media. It means satellite in Ka band, which is quite cheap and available almost everywhere, GSM operators, and anything else. So the second part of the problem was how to solve the automatic load balancing, so they don't have to fiddle with the different channels. So the system is able to automatically pick up the best available channel or even combine available channels together to provide the higher bandwidth or higher reliability of the solution.
Great, so thank you for that. Now, the solution is installed now and you've developed that. What improvements has this enabled in the service that you provide to the Czech police? Sorry, to the Czech public, actually.
Well, yeah. Sure. I think that the most profitable thing is for the providing the service is that they have available the communication almost everywhere in the middle of the field or in the forest with a high data bandwidth. That means that they are even able to transfer the live video streams from the middle of nowhere, and of course it helps to handle the critical situation. It can move the picture to the bigger teams, which can do the management of the situation and so on. And of course, it also brings the higher data throughput to the fixed installations. There have been up to now just very expensive leased lines used for this type of communication.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that, Camille. And I think it's fantastic for us to see a real use case example in action, which is delivered against a particular need, and we've seen the results and the return. So I really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
So now I'd like to transition back to another guest who's just joined me in the studio. That's Adam Philpott.
Hi.
Welcome, Adam.
Good to be here.
Adam runs our security business within Cisco in EMEA. So, of course, security is a key aspect of this overall transition and change that we're facing, Adam, in the industry today. So I think it may be useful if you can just highlight some of the key challenges that organizations are facing from a security perspective right now.
No, absolutely. So I think there are really three key ones that we regularly hear from customers. The first one is complexity, very complex security environments, and also traditional ways of delivering security services are very manual, access control is very labor intensive and costly to deliver. So complexity is a big challenge for them. I think the second one is also the threat landscape. You know, threats are why we need security in the first place. And what our customers are telling us is that it's extremely sophisticated now, the types of threats that they're facing. You know, that not only the threats themselves, things like advanced persistent threats, but also the volume of them and the challenges they face in dealing with those and the motivation of the actors behind those threats. So the second piece is really around the threat. And the third piece, which is very relevant today, I think, as well, is around some of the new business models. And Puni touched on this earlier, you know, talking about customers trying to leverage cloud, trying to leverage mobile, but doing that opens them up to additional risks that we need to help them remediate.
Okay, great. Thank you, Adam. Now, what security considerations should customers have?
Yeah, good question. I think, you know, we think of security in the context of the threats that they're facing. So when you think about the threat and the way it comes into your organization, there are things that we can do before a threat, during a threat, during an attack, and then after that attack. And typically, organizations are focused on before, you know, hardening the outside to stop attacks coming in. And that's still really relevant in terms of access control, you know, very rich context to control things like that. But attacks are going to get through. You know, I talked about the sophistication of attacks a moment ago. Things are going to get through. And so we also need to think about during an attack, what do we do? And here the considerations are around, have I got the right analytical capabilities? Have I got the right visibility to help me quickly identify that I'm under attack and then take action to prevent that attack? And then finally, after, these attacks are sophisticated, and even if we identify them, some of them may be successful. So again, we need capabilities to help us understand that we have been attacked, that it has been successful, and to understand what it's done, tidy up after it, but then also come back to that before phase where we can harden our defenses against future attacks.
So, Adam, it sounds as though in that the ability to have the analytics to understand what's happening, there could be a lot of information that would be required there to sieve, to sort through. So, which links into, I guess, this beyond SDN and the application-centric infrastructure and some thoughts that could be developed there. So how could the application-centric infrastructure help organizations with this transition to address the security challenges?
You know, I think there's multiple ways. You know, and it comes back to some of the items I've already mentioned in terms of the challenges and the considerations. So first of all, around provisioning. You know, when we think about it, we're now able to light up applications very, very quickly in minutes. But the challenge our customers face is because of legacy ways of doing things, it still takes weeks to secure that application. Okay, so all we've done is shift the bottleneck and we still can't deliver that application securely. So what ACI enables us to do is to deliver security as part of that overall provisioning of that application. And I think the other thing it does is, because applications are now more dynamic and they're moving in and out of public and private clouds and within private clouds, it means that the security context can follow that application rather than an army of people doing manual configuration. And the final thing I would say on provisioning is that Gartner posit that about 95% of vulnerabilities are due to misconfiguration. So what this does is help with reducing that misconfiguration through automation. So I think provisioning's one part of it. The second part is really around performance. You know, it is important to have in-depth security, and typically there's a lot of data flows within a data center between VMs, so not in and out, but within a data center. And from a performance perspective, it's been hard for us to put segmentation and access controls in between VMs. ACI enables us to do that at scale, which is extremely important. You know, when you think about banking, segmenting between retail and investment, for example, from a compliance perspective, a great advantage that we can now do at scale. But the final piece, and I think this ties to where you were going with the visibility element, is around the protection itself. Huge amount of data flowing around, and this is really a big data opportunity in a sense. We're seeing a lot, and visibility is everything. You know, we can't make decisions and we can't control what we don't see. So big data is a real opportunity, and not just within the data center and not just within a given organization, but up in the cloud. And Cisco have a great capability, a cloud security capability called Security Intelligence Operations. We see a huge amount of data, 13 billion web feeds a day, 35% of email traffic right up in the cloud there. And that's a good example of some big data analytics we can do to then feed back into the data center and make informed decisions about threats.
Great. So some fantastic opportunities there, Adam, to help us to take the benefit of some of this change that is taking place. So thank you for that. Now, Puni, I'd like to come back to you after some of the dialogue that we've had so far with the different panel members, but to come back to talk a little bit about the enterprise for a moment. So what's your thoughts around enterprise organizations? Do you think that they will see a similar magnitude of change resulting from this application economy?
No doubt about it. I think what's happening to enterprise in a way is a lot more profound than what's happening to service providers, because to some extent service providers have always enjoyed a business model where they package infrastructure and a bunch of capabilities and sell them on a consumption basis. Enterprise IT has not had to do that until recently. The advent of cloud has meant that the forward-looking CIOs are saying, well, look, I don't need to expose my enterprise to how the IT works. I just need to sell a service internally. And the easier I make the service to consume, the more people will embrace it. And so what is happening is businesses, enterprise is beginning to think of how to use technology to change the way they create stickiness with their customers. So you can think about, on your tablet, accessing your bank account. Now, that has a phenomenal amount of technology behind it to make that experience possible. The early mover advantage disappears very quickly because all banks do it.
Yep.
So, the scale for enterprise really is transitioning from being a traditional in-house IT to being an internal service provider. And to do that well really means to embrace some of the application enablement that Renee talked about and some of the really turnkey security capabilities. And I think provisioning is going to be absolutely critical.
So what you've talked about there, Puni, is really quite a big shift in the role of IT. And with any change, that will take place, some people and some organizations will be more willing and able to adapt to this overall change. So are enterprise IT managers ready? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah.
Are they ready and are they willing?
So enterprise IT managers, like most professions, come in a very wide spectrum. And I think what we have all gotten used to is to look at enterprise IT in isolation. And that's actually quite limiting. You need to look at the mandate that enterprise has given IT. So some of the really progressive enterprise IT teams that I referenced earlier are those where their business has recognized that the role of IT is to enable top-line development, revenue generation. And so when the mandate is bigger, they hire people who are capable of driving change. And so then the enterprise IT team is leading. Unfortunately, there are still enterprises who are quite conservative, where they define the role of enterprise IT in a more limited way, and so they hire appropriately. And so those organizations will follow. When we look at a SMAC stack, an app-enabled business process reinvention, those are where the business has agreed a mandate and the team has agreed. We estimate that's probably about 30% of the large enterprises.
Okay.
The rest of them are following, if you like.
And then I guess, Puni, there's also the other challenge of when there is, within an enterprise organization or any organization, IT is not transitioning quickly enough. The principle of shadow IT, of rogue IT that we start to see in the industry today. And I guess that comes out as a result of shifting of funds to different lines of business rather than maybe IT holding the purse string all the time, and maybe from some frustrations as around IT to be able to move. Are they moving quickly enough, etc.? What's your thoughts around that as a concept?
Yeah. So there are two different things that happen here. One is funds that are earmarked as IT and maybe now being controlled in a more federated way. In a way that is easier to quantify and therefore track because they had been earmarked as IT. The second is where line of business managers saying, hold on a minute, I can do this differently. I can do what I used to do with 100 people, 20 vans. I can do it differently if I do a little bit of technology. I think what we heard from Pramacom and the Czech police is that instead of flooding the countryside with lots of police, they can, through technology, share information so that the limited number of people who are out there are so well informed they can make better decisions. Now, the challenge with that kind of environment is that that was never an IT budget. That is a reallocation of a non-IT budget into IT. Do you want to call it shadow IT, or do you want to call it the digitization of business and the inevitability of what happens? I think the most visible discussion about this is around marketing, where we all have heard about the chief digital officer, which is really nothing to do with internal IT. It's all about how do you change your conversation with your customer. So to come back to your point about, should it be controlled centrally? Probably yes. And as an analyst, I see some of the additional capability at an infrastructure layer making it easier for the monitoring and at least supervision of this centrally, but at the same time allowing more agility to the people who want to consume IT differently.
Okay, so thank you for that. I think there's some very interesting changes that are taking place right now within the industry, but also within our customers' organizations, and they're, I think, trying to work out which route they want to go down. So, Puni, what would you view the relationship is between the applications, the data, and also this overall storm from an analytics perspective that we're seeing?
Oh, probably one of the most exciting changes that's facing our profession, the IT profession. For so long, we have viewed applications as the container that helps us capture data, manipulate data, store it, disseminate it. So we defined information through the lens of application. But of course, Cisco has been promoting the idea of the Internet of Things. We heard about, the advent of traffic over the cloud, mobile-enabled interactions, all of them producing so much data that you now have tools to visualize this data without necessarily pumping it through an application. And so from a high level, you can see the pressure on the infrastructure managers, where they're just beginning to get comfortable with the idea of how applications are changing. And the next tidal wave is coming along, where there will be some data that needs to be consumed in its data form through some smaller tools rather than applications. So yes, there will continue to be a lot of data produced by applications and consumed by applications, but data itself now is going to drive some of the demand.
Okay. So what would your advice be to someone who is in the role of being an IT manager within the enterprise as to how to adapt with this change and to manage through it?
Oh, okay. I think we normally have three levels of advice that we try to give people. The first is get comfortable with change. Don't try to think because it wasn't how it was done last year, it shouldn't be different. The technology industry is doing a terrific job in packing more capability into successive generations. So the really successful IT managers will be those who can be in a position to embrace those as fast as possible. The second is very practical. If you are running an infrastructure with distinct teams for networks and processing and storage, you may want to already start thinking about how do you unify that? How do you take advantage of management capability to allow you to get more consistency and get more specialization into communicating what goes on? The third part of it is really down to funding. So many IT managers define their funding model as the annual internal IT budget, and that limits what they think of as scope and possibility. if enterprise IT can move towards a more managed services model for funding, then, you know, as we discussed earlier, new funding is available. It just needs to be seen as accessible. It needs to be opened up in a new way. It's not the traditional budgeting process.
Yeah.
So those are the three things, you know, the change element, the restructuring of workload inside infrastructure, and then the rethinking about how enterprise IT is to be funded.
Okay. And on that last one that you mentioned, Puni, on the funding, are there, and I don't expect you to name them, but are there examples of organizations today that you feel have gone through successfully that transition on securing of budgets through different routes?
I can give you a very public example. HSBC is reputed to have the biggest software development team in the world. Not just among banks, but just biggest software development team. And the reason for that is because the team is structured as a professional software development team in order to go and position their capability internally to lines of business.
Okay.
You mentioned, you know, creating firewalls between investment and retail. All of those units are seen as distinct customers, not for their internal email requirement or application requirement, but how they then create products to sell to the marketplace. So that is a very public example.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Puni, for that. That's been some very interesting commentary there. So what I'd like to do now is to invite you to ask questions. The panel are available, both people physically with me here, but also via video, to take your questions. We'd be delighted to take your questions. Please tweet them. Again, it's at Cisco MER. Please do ask some questions. So let me just take a quick look at what we have available here now. You see the panel looking a little bit concerned, wondering what question is coming from them. So
it's like a test, isn't it?
It is like a test. So let me see. So the first question, which is from Faye Hawkins. So I would like to ask Renee you this question. So if we look from a overall EMEA perspective as a region, and we talked at the beginning, I talked around the competitive nature of EMEA as a region, and some of the things that we need to do in order to ensure that we are able to adapt to the constant change and challenge within all the different diverse countries that we have within the region. So the question is, how does ACI as a concept and as our vision of this beyond SDN principle link to the ability for us to be more competitive within the region of EMEA? So if you can give some thoughts, and then Adam and Puni, I'd be delighted for your comments as well.
So first of all, it comes back again. The primarily goal is to reduce complexity, because simpler solutions are more reliable solution, more secure solution, and are also more, let me say, ideal to be having fast transitions, adoptions, etc. So ACI is basically an open model. So irrespective to some comments, it has like an open northbound API, and basically it's technology, protocol, application agnostic. So we can easily, let's take the example of Adam again for security, we can easily adopt compliance rules for the different countries, okay? So Europe is very different from the US, and every European country has his own regulatory and laws by itself, so we can easily adopt those things. And as we are open, we are also working together with partners, like for example F5 or all the security companies, and we can easily integrate those appliances also in this architecture, which helps us to be very, very fast on the market and also very diverse. So we don't try to solve all the diversities under one umbrella, but rather we open it up and we partner with these different...
It's the power of the ecosystem.
Yes, correct. I think that is one of the big advantages we do have here, okay? Because customers are demanding for that.
Okay.
Let me add to that as well. I think, it comes back to that old concept of keeping the lights on. By automating and reducing this complexity, we can free up our customers' budgets to invest in more innovative things. A good example is in security. I talked about this before, during, and after, and typically we spent all our time configuring to harden the outside before. By automating that, it frees us up to focus on what's really going on, the threats that are coming in. Our IT, our InfoSec teams are really keen to be freed up to focus on that, to stop these things getting, being successful. So again, we get that piece done in an automated fashion, frees us up to focus on what really matters.
Okay, thank you. Now, Puni, I've got a question for you. So linked to the comments on the previous question around automation and the ability to innovate more rapidly and quickly. So we have a question here from Nick Booth, who's a freelance journalist, asking, will jobs go in an IT organization if a solution like this is deployed? And I guess this is this principle of automation, and what does it mean for the people?
Yeah. This is a concern we have heard in the 40 years of the IT industry as successive generations of automation is introduced, the concern that jobs will go. When we look in the macro perspective, IT jobs have just grown. We, as an industry, as a profession, we employ far more people now than we did 10 years ago, even though there is a lot more automation now. And the reason for that is because technology is becoming more pervasive. We all use more of it. We are more productive as a result of it. And we can see so much more growth. It's a bit like we're hitting the knee of the hockey stick in a way, with connecting up objects, not just people. So I have no concern that the IT profession will shrink. Within that, though, we need to understand that some of the things that are done manually today will go away. And so what is going to be required is a fairly aggressive retraining education program and a willingness of people to acquire new skills, because there isn't going to be a shortage of jobs to be done. It's going to require different skills to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you. Okay, René, I'm going to come back to you again. So if we look at ACI as a solution, and again, this is from Faye Hawkins again, is this a solution which is only for big companies?
So that's a good question. Actually, not at all. I can say we start probably from the larger perspective. Okay, we are going to adopt these first and the bigger ones. But over time, we're going to offer solutions for all segments, and the benefit is, of course, there for all different segments. And let me say something about the smaller scale customers, because those tendency have even less IT skills. Okay, so those are also the customers which are likely to go together with a cloud provider or a service or a managed service, but they still want to keep control of their own data center. And for those, it's really a brilliant solution too, because this solution, this architecture, is not anymore about knowing features and technology details. Here it's really about the application and the data and defining SLAs. And therefore, absolutely not. It's a solution which will go across all different segments.
Okay. And will this solution lock me into Cisco if I'm a customer?
Yeah, that's another good question. Actually, our solution is built up with a totally open northbound API, because that's one of the key, let me say, demands from all customers, because especially service providers, they're going to use their own orchestration tools. They have their own way how to operate all these. Towards the south sides, towards the infrastructure, even our own equipment is divided in two. Means we have like a software shim layer in between, which offers us the possibility to exchange ASICs and other components at any given time, depending on the innovation of the different hardware, let me say, companies. So therefore, it's a totally open environment. There is no lock-in at all.
Okay, great. Thank you, René. Now I have a question for Paolo. Paolo, hopefully you're still out there. Yeah. So Paolo, the question is, will the application-centric infrastructure be a revolution or an evolution for the service provider? What's your thoughts?
Well, interesting. I think it's going to be both. Let me say, from a pure technology perspective, it's much more an evolution than a revolution. Many of them are migrating to 40 gig within the data center. ACI plugs straight into that transition, and it moves to 100 gig A lot of those service providers are moving both in data center and public network into a policy network model or controller network model, and that's exactly the architecture we have with ACI. And also the evolutionary aspects, rather than revolutionary, is bound to the breadth of the ecosystem we have, right? We had the launch in New York, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we were on stage with partners like F5, partners like NetApp, partners like Microsoft, and so on. And when you look at the way we do business with service providers, it's definitely a business done with those partners. So from an ecosystem perspective, it's definitely an evolution. The revolutionary aspect, though, take just one example. I mean, those service providers are surrounded by revolutionary events or trends, one of them being the Internet of Everything. So this hyperconnectivity model where you connect things to things, things to people, people to process, is just about to happen. And for service providers, it means there would be a huge amount of new application developers, very small applications that, as an example, they plug into the home gateway and they're allowed to do domotics or home control. They plug into and collect sensors for agriculture and so on. So imagine those applications that, first of all, are created with a velocity that was not even conceivable before, because the ecosystem of application developers in the Internet of Everything will expand quite fast, but also would be very much in movement from one piece of cloud to the other. So you will have movement of application from VM to VM across different tenants. So that requires a level of agility in the data center and a level of application-driven data center in terms of proper policies that is pretty unique. So for them to take advantage and being an integral part of Internet of Everything is not only about providing the hyperconnectivity and the lower level of cloud, very close to sensors, but it's also about having that type of velocity so they can onboard applications, both from established vendors, but also from this plethora of new startups that will make them successful in the IoE transition. So long answer to a short question, but I think it's both. It's both evolutionary from a technology perspective and revolutionary in terms of allowing them to tap into major inflection points.
Great, thank you, Paolo. Very insightful. I appreciate the richness of your answer there. So now let's go back to. I've got more questions coming in. You'll all be delighted to know. Puni, another question for you. Does ACI help to support the journey towards a DevOps model?
From a technology point of view, absolutely, no question about it. The more you can make the infrastructure be self-provisioning, if you like, the more it will help developers have confidence that they can reiterate frequently. I want to couch it with a caveat, though. A DevOps model is more a business model than a technology model. Mm-hmm. So yes, providing the business impediments are removed, and an organization wants to embrace that way of doing things, then I would have thought it would drive more adoption of ACI, because it will definitely make it a lot easier.
So you do see a link there?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. Great. Thank you. Now I have a question for Pramacom. So hopefully the team is still out there. So do you see the capability that you talked about earlier being replicated in other public sector organizations?
Well, definitely we hope so.
And can you give some examples of where you think there could be a relevance?
Yeah, well, so as I said, the technology allows to create high throughput channels with a high security level. So this is a feature which can be appreciated by many organizations, I think from the governmental through private. I think that anyone who needs to transfer high volumes of data through secure channels which are available almost everywhere.
Okay, so I can certainly see from that you've talked through, there's many examples where there could be high relevance within public sector for sure, and in many countries, I would say as well, to be able to replicate the solution. So thank you for that, and I'm sure you're delighted the ability to scale that as well, across many countries as well. So what I'd like to do now is going to go to one final question, So in that final question, which I would like to, so Adam, if I could get your comments around this, and then maybe, I don't know if Puni, you may have some comments as well. So if we look at what we've talked about today from an overall transition and a trend perspective within the industry,
Yep.
what do you think this means to the average worker within an organization? So will this help a salesman, a designer, a marketing executive to do their job better?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, ultimately what we're looking to do is deliver services more rapidly, more securely to people who consume them. You know, we've talked a lot about the data center, but we also need to think about how those individuals consume them. And this comes back to another part of the stack that Puni talked about earlier, which is mobile. Mm-hmm. You know, people are consuming them on mobile devices. They're not necessarily connecting into our private networks. They're connecting directly to the cloud. This gives them the ability to do that quickly, securely, at scale.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, with that, I'd like to bring today's session to a close. But before I do that, I'd like to say a huge thank you to the guests. So to Adam, to Rene, to Puni, also to Paolo, and to Pramacom and the Czech Police. Very much appreciate your joining us today for the session. And thank you to you, the audience, for watching. And I hope you've enjoyed the richness of today's Trend Talk. We would be delighted if you would share with us any feedback that you would have on today's session. And the next Trend Talk will be about mobility, and we'll be announcing the date around that very soon. So please do watch this space. So with that, thank you very much. I really appreciate you joining.